The music is so incredible, I can't function when it's on. Beauty just wipes you out. You have to avoid beauty if you're going to stay in the world. I try to avoid beauty as much as I can. And then I notice how beautiful my fingers are. It's true. That calibrates at 750. Exquisite beauty takes you beyond what the nervous system can handle. So I said, in the book I'm finishing now, or the one I just finished, I don't remember which, that when people get to a certain level of consciousness, there's a tendency to leave the world because one gets sort of removed by it. And you can see how hard it is to function at 750, to be in the condition that that music takes you to, and take the subway and get to work on time. Would feel a little difficult. So the tendency is to withdraw from the world and rebalance, if it's possible to rebalance, and to see what one's remaining capacities may be. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about karma, a subject which is familiar to those of an Eastern background and not all that familiar to people with a Western background. However, familiar to spiritual students. And so I thought I would focus today on its implications, its real significance, its complexity, and at the same time simplicity, and what it really means. We said that the entire universe is one karmic unity. There is one all-encompassing karmic totality to the allness of all of creation, in which everything is in, from moment to moment, incredible and perfect balance with everything else. Harmonic perfection. Part of that perfection, harmonic perfection, is what appears to be chaotic. And that which seems to be chaotic and rule against the harmonic balance of the universe is only so because of it being perceived in that way. That harmony includes the capacity, you might say the quantum potentiality, to suddenly become its opposite. Gentle, gentle children, listen to me or I'll kill you. People say, where did that come from? Adolf Hitler, Bin Laden, bang, man, we were praying and singing and enjoying the incense, and all of a sudden, a bomb came out of someplace. How can that be? Doesn't that disprove the existence of God? Well, God's hard to get rid of. God just won the vote back into existence again. I was so relieved. I thought they were going to vote God out of existence, out of the money, out of the Constitution. Oof. They're going to take it, in God we trust, and eliminate it. Boy, I was scared. But God made it through by 3 votes or something, or 5 votes. I understand there were 5 idiots that voted against it. Remember, what was her name? Madeline Murray O'Hare. Speaking of karma. I remember this guy on TV trying to eliminate God from our society, and I thought, Jesus, didn't he ever read the story of Madeline? Well, he never heard of karma. Karma is interesting. Oh boy, I'm back in the intellect again. Thank you, Lord. Back into reason and logic. Whew. That was scary. Sometimes I think I'm going to disappear. I was talking to my friend here this morning. I said, "Are you getting smaller?" He seems to be getting smaller every time I see him. My clothes keep getting bigger, and as time goes on, you get smaller and smaller. Pretty soon, you're looking up to see yourself in the mirror. Eventually, you disappear, I guess. Well, the karma is really an incredibly great story. You can also skip it altogether. At any one instant, you can just completely and totally surrender all that you think you are to God. And, of course, that could be a karmically determined event. What is the significance of karma? In some instances, it's a profound significance. It also has the capacity to light up areas of your own life so that they make sense. Without understanding karma, as is done in the West, it leaves one with really only one tool to approach God, and that's faith. Because nothing in life makes sense. Why are some children born crippled and blind, born with AIDS, born from cocaine-addicted mothers with brain damage? We noted in earlier lectures that at the moment of birth, everybody already has a calibrated level of consciousness. At the moment of birth, instantly, you enter this domain at a calibrated level of consciousness. Now, we could explain physical differences genetically. We could say, well, that genetic potpourri, the game of chance of genes and sperms and all that stuff, would explain why. This child is crippled, this child is blind, this child is deaf, and this child is a genius, and this child writes symphonies at age 4. That would be the mechanistic, reductionistic, scientific explanation. It's just genetic chance, combinations and permutations of all those genes and chromosomes. So that would be fine. Except that when we calibrate their levels of consciousness, we find that the calibrated level of consciousness is completely different. That is not genetically determined. It's not determined by chromosomes. In fact, it's the other way around. Because of karmic inheritance, one automatically comes into certain genetic and chromosomal patterns, which then become the mechanism by which that karmic propensity expresses itself. What we see in the visible domain, the discernible domain, is consequences and not causes. The fastest spiritual advance is to jump beyond the mind's belief in causality. There is no causality anywhere in this domain. There is nothing causing anything. All is becoming that which it is out of its own karmic potentiality and fulfillment, because creation reveals itself. And as it reveals itself, perception sees it as progressive and calls it evolution. Yeah. So from the moment of birth, there is already, let's say, a quality of karma that we can calibrate as a level of consciousness. We use this little pattern here, just sort of like a homing base, you know? So I remember where I am here in the world. Oh, yes. Well, most of the people I'm talking about are even on here. They didn't make it that far. So this domain seems to be purgatorial in its qualities. Let's ask if we got permission to ask that. We have permission to ask that here. This is a purgatorial type domain, in which all opportunities exist both high and low. One can rise or fall. One gets a chance to undo the negative karma and acquire positive karma. All right, so this is a formative domain, purgatorial. You can tell it's purgatorial because it goes from the very ugliest and worst and most horrific to the most divine. The slums of some of the poorest countries in the world where I've been, the slums are unbelievable to somebody who's grown up in the Western world in America. To walk through those slums and see the style of life is like shocking. You don't even believe it. It's not even possible that which calls itself human could survive in these conditions. Eating bugs, bitten by rats, using as building materials pieces of scrap and cardboard all pasted together outside of, what's the capital of Brazil? Rio de Janeiro? Well, anyway, not Brasilia, but the old city was. On the side of the mountain there, they call them, I forget the name of the words. But they live in pieces of cardboard boxes, and maybe a family of 12 lives in there, and they take turns sleeping in there. Anyway, it's incredible. And everybody begs for a living. The biggest mistake is to give a begging child a penny. They're then over you like a swarm of army ants. And you realize that you're not going to be able to hold back this flood. You can hand out money to the children coming up to you, and it's not going to alter anything because there's floods of them. As you give out handsfuls of pennies, more and more and more come, and more and more and more come. They would come from miles and miles and miles. And you see that it's not going to change anything at all. Trying to change the circumstance, because what you're seeing is the effect. You're seeing the effect, you're not seeing the cause. Certain neighborhoods pull to them that which is negative. The broken window theory in sociology. The first broken factory window. If you don't repair it, it brings graffiti. The graffiti brings the crime. That brings the rape. That brings the robbery. That brings the drugs. That brings the arson. That brings the murder. The negative energy field then pulls to it all that which is aligned with that field. People say, I don't believe in karma. I don't want anybody to believe in karma. Because what one is at any instant is the karmic conclusion of all that has preceded. You know, the main reason it's not well understood in the West is Jesus did not get into it in any great depth. He only mentioned it briefly as a subject. But the teachings of Christianity are that all actions have a consequence, a spiritual consequence in another domain, that it has to do with the fact that every action then has some kind of a registering in the soul. Some kind of aspect of the soul registers for all time, every action and decision, and this will determine your fate in later other dimensions. Heavens, hells, and purgatories are pretty much accepted by all the world's religions as a reality. Sometimes people resist karma because they have it confused with reincarnation. They are two different things. Reincarnation is one thing, karma is another. All religions teach karma, but they don't use that term. That is what, a Sanskrit term, karma? I suppose, yes. They don't use the terminology. Because life seems unfair to yourself and to others as you look around. There's a bitterness towards God, and eventually even a hatred of God comes out of the lack of karma, understanding karma. Therefore, I think it's beneficial to one's faith and understanding, to understand that what you see are consequences of things that have been brought in to one's life over long expanses of time. With no understanding of karma, God then appears unfair. How does God allow this crippled child to be born? You hear that all the time. Therefore, I don't believe in God. So, failure to comprehend karma, I think, leads to a lot of atheism and agnosticism, and even eventually rage and hatred of God. Because it doesn't accept responsibility. You see, with karma, you accept the responsibility that one's own decisions in prior existences are what have determined the situation. Otherwise, it looks like an arbitrary God just didn't give a rap about this kid and favored this one, or what? How do you explain God? One of the best uses of kinesiology is as a research tool. Within 3 minutes flat, you can satisfy all your questions about karma. That's if you're slow. Within about 1 minute flat, you can discover the likelihoods of why your life is the way it is and certain things have recurred. And as people get into spiritual study, they begin to sort of intuitively get, I must have done something in some lifetime to explain why this is the 14th time a white truck has run into the back of my car. 14 times, 14 different cities. There's got to be something there. We've all had recurrent patterns in our life that are beyond explanation, that you can consult all the wise ones of the world, and frankly, they don't know them. They don't know the answers. Unless you're aware of the reality of the spiritual domain and that it overrules the physical. It overrules the physical. It's only when you identify a certain pattern and then you say, it's very likely that such and such happened. And you'll find, yes, it did, in fact, such and such happened. For all this sequence of events that have happened, let's say, in relationships, I must have been an SOB in some lifetime. That's the only explanation, is it? Why should everybody beat up on you and give you a hard time in relationships in this lifetime? Well, they're waiting for you, folks. That's generally the truth of it. All right. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to get what it's all about. And it seems rather obvious that every decision then sets up a vibrational pattern somewhere in the soul body, which exists over time. And thus we see in this lifetime the externalization, the physicality, the expression of that, which we have become. I always thought Jesus Christ didn't talk too much about karma for a couple of reasons. First of all, it would have made him unpopular in the society in which he was living. It wasn't in India, it wasn't Far East, where it would have been, so what? No, it was, because such things were known for 1,000 years before the birth of Christ in the Far East. But where he grew up, they were pretty rudimentary. The calibrated level of consciousness at the time of Jesus was 100. At the time of the birth of Buddha, it was 90. 500 years later, at the time of birth of Christ, it was 100. So he's talking to people with consciousness level of 100, And his teachings were unpopular at the time, to put it mildly. Yeah, he was not exactly a popular teacher around town, and to the powers that be. So I always thought, in the height of wisdom, he just didn't bring it up as a specific topic per se. He said it, that all your actions will have consequences in a later life. He did mention once in Matthew something about Isaiah has come back to us as John the Baptist. In Matthew, that's the only quote making a direct reference. Huh? On such an advanced level of consciousness, it's obvious that what you are, that the ego and your karma and that which you are all one and the same thing. You don't have to worry about karma. Just work on what your problems are in the present, because they are the consequence of karma. So you don't have to really study and teach karma. So I thought he just bypassed it as unnecessary. He gave the folks enough to think about it anyway. A more sophisticated group, I think, if he was speaking to people of a more advanced consciousness, there might have been greater explanation. As we've said in previous lectures, the purpose of the life of Jesus Christ was salvation, that he did come down directly from heaven as a manifestation directly from heaven and had no prior lifetimes, no human lifetimes. That's correct. So, he wasn't really gung-ho on the subject to begin with, having not had a lot of previous lifetimes. His familiarity was with heaven and the nature of heaven and how one gets there and how one avoids the other direction. The Buddha, on the other hand, had many, many previous lifetimes and therefore spoke freely of it. Let's see. The Buddha did indeed, in fact, have many previous human lifetimes. We did. Okay, so two different ways of approaching the subject. If what your spiritual difficulties are now is the result of your karmic inheritance from prior lifetimes, it doesn't really change it. What it does do is make it more acceptable. If buses keep running into the back of your car, and then you find in some lifetime you drove your oxen over your neighbor's gardens periodically out of paranoia or whatever, it would make sense, huh? So a little karmic research into your own particular grievances gets rid of self-pity. Gets rid of self-pity, indignant rage, resentment. How could God be so unfair? When I was a kid, everybody was going out for football. Football. Christ, I weighed 62 pounds. So I used to hang like this every day because I thought I could stretch myself out and get taller. And I ate a lot, but I couldn't get fatter or taller, so. You see, it's like unfair, isn't it? I mean, the other kids are mesomorphs. They get out there and knock people over and wrestle with each other and all kinds of wild things. And I'm reading a book, so. Karmic propensity, then. So many people then have many resentments about many things in their life. And if you check back on them, you'll see that they were earned. They were earned, deserved. And now you're thankful for them because you say, well, if I was an SOB in past lifetimes and cruel and selfish and beat my wife every day like they do in other parts of the world, it's your duty to beat your wife every day in certain parts of the world. Maybe they have to come back and get beaten because they fail to beat their wife every day. So it puts it into proportion. So some understanding of karma then gets you out of self-pity, resentment, hatred of God, cursing God for being unfair, and putting you here with whatever limitations you have. And everyone has limitations. Because all of creation is one karmic unity, then we represent not only personal karma, but we represent the karmic pattern, the evolution of consciousness on this planet, and to where it has evolved in the evolution of mankind. So we're stuck with the karma of mankind itself. Homo sapienism, a bad disease, Homo sapienism, which can give you everything, arthritis, blindness, deafness, convulsions. A lot goes with it, huh? Having to work for a living, yeah, and all those unfairnesses. It's okay to talk about the daisies in the field, neither do they labor. It wasn't a human being out there in the field. It wouldn't be just sitting there looking beautiful, waving in the wind. If you go into work, get a shovel, Daisy, and let's see how good you think you got it. Fred was over at our house for the weekend and was shoveling dirt, you see. If he was a Daisy, he wouldn't have to shovel dirt. He could just sit there and look pretty. He helped us out with a greenhouse which had fallen down. Its karmic propensity was to decay over time with dry rot. An understanding of karma then is important to look at it. That you didn't just arise spontaneously out of nowhere as you are at this moment. That somehow out of the evolution of consciousness. Now life and consciousness are one and the same. We went back into Prior to the universe this morning. Susan and I said, let's go back prior. Yes. We got out of the unmanifest comes the manifest. Out of the unmanifest comes the manifest. But consciousness and life are one and the same. And they don't appear until existence, until the manifest expresses itself as existence. That which has no existence is beyond consciousness. Resist. Out of the unmanifest arises the manifest. Resist. The manifest is devoid of life or consciousness. Resist. Out of the manifest arises existence. Resist. Innate to existence is consciousness, and consciousness and life are one and the same. Resist. Wow. I said, that's enough before breakfast. To know that consciousness and life cannot be extinguished. Let's see if that's so. Life cannot be extinguished. Resist. Consciousness cannot be extinguished. Resist. Wow. What does that mean? That means death is impossible. That which has life eternally. That which is conscious. You can swat the fly, but you can't kill its life energy because it flits around in the astral and comes right back as another fly. You can't extinguish life or consciousness. When I was a kid, it was okay to have mercury. My father would bring home mercury, which they took out of filling stations or something, and we had a wonderful collection of mercury. Boom, boom, it was real heavy. And go, go, go. Now it'd be illegal, I guess, because mercury vapor poisoning would send everybody into paranoid fits, and you'd have the EPA knocking at your door. But in those days, we lived in a more simple world of ignorance, so we would put it in a... We'd put it in a bowl, and to amuse me, my father would pour some mercury in this thing, and I'd, of course, try to pick it up. You know, I was maybe 4 at the time. I'd try and pick up the mercury, and it would just go that way. You pick up that one, it would go that way. No matter what you did, you can't pick up the mercury. It just moves around someplace else. Which is the way life, then, cannot be extinguished. So we have to give up fearing death because it's not going to be an escape hatch. No, you're not going to get out of the deal with death. Everybody grieves death, and I fear death. Come on, I know. On the other side of your consciousness, it's your big cop-out. Oh, I'll die and get away from it all. Boy, it should be that easy, huh? No, it seems the karmic propensities then prevail, in and out, weaving through, it could be an infinite number of lifetimes. It can be an infinite number of human lifetimes. I never asked that before. It's possible to have an infinite number of human lifetimes. Resist. So, isn't that neat? I mean, you never want to go to heaven, you never want to go to hell, you just want to go to work every day. Propagate, have sex, eat up a storm. You can keep doing it. Wow, what a relief. Oh, mint chocolate chip ice cream, I do not have to leave thee. I'll get old, totter over, come back as another little kid, and have my chocolate chip mint ice cream again. No end. Endless. You never have to return to God. Is that a fact? You never have to return to God and resist. You never have to become enlightened, resist. You can just keep going like this forever. Whoa. So, man, some people that's going to be relief. Other people, it means unless you do some kind of progressive spiritual work, you're going to keep reincarnating as a physical, as a human being. That's so, resist. You have choice to reincarnate, resist. From the astral domains, resist. So being here is a choice because it's a place to evolve, resist. The reason we have permission to ask about what I'm thinking about, resist. Okay. That which is most, there are domains where people go who refuse God, resist. So you don't have to go to God in a number of ways. It's not necessary. You can just keep recycling. You can keep recycling until an inspiration comes to move on ahead. You know, the Buddha apparently didn't like physical reincarnations because he didn't speak too highly of it. He said, unless you become enlightened, you're going to have to get re-physicalized periodically or reincarnate. And of course, he was looking at the downside of human life. He was looking at old age, sorrow, poverty, and death. That those things he thought were inevitable. And that the way beyond it was to transcend karma by becoming enlightened, meaning to transcend one's identification with the ego, its origin, its function, and its structure, and to realize the self, to realize one's Buddha nature. Christianity does not emphasize enlightenment at all. There is in Catholicism a condition or one, I forgot the formal ecclesiastic name for it. This signifies a high level of consciousness. As a lifestyle, Christianity recognizes sainthood, and generally is talking about the 500s, high 500s, like Father Pio at 590, the Pope at 570. The Pope, to me, is saint-like. But that's just my perception. I can tell by the way he walks. He's gotten higher as he got older, so you slow down as the level of consciousness goes up. You have to forcibly stay out of that certain level of consciousness, or it's not possible to function very well. So I see he sort of fights with it. Therefore, whatever goes on in our life currently is really the consequence of the totality of all that has gone before, as it is expressing itself under current conditions. It's not causing the current conditions. It's expressing itself in this way. It has the potentiality to express itself. And under these conditions, that potentiality will express itself this way. And under these conditions, that potentiality will express itself this way. So nothing is a rigid causality, an inflexible causality. On the contrary, closer to truth is the whole concept of quantum potentiality, in which the prior, what has gone before, is influencing not just specifically the content of consciousness, it's influencing the whole context. So the whole context then is what increases the likelihood of certain potentialities coming into expression. In spiritual work, we in the beginning focus on content of consciousness, How could I have been so mean to my stepmother? How could I have been so this and that to my mother-in-law? And you feel guilty how you were selfish and stole your sister's cookie, the last cookie on her birthday. You've been feeling guilty about that for 45 years. And that she was some little dinky thing way back there, and somehow you can't get it out of your head. You took the last cookie from your on your sister's birthday. Oh, that selfishness, that greediness, that horribleness. You hate yourself for it. It's horrible. 50 years later, you're still at it. Probably on death's door, you're going to say, God, I stole my sister's cookie, please. Let me off the hook. Guilt just looks for something to anchor itself into. It isn't just the guilt about your sister's cookie. It's all the accumulated guilt about everything throughout all of lifetimes, anchoring itself into this particular expression. Some comprehension of the nature of karma and maybe how it came about in your own lifetime can facilitate certain difficult things to transcend, make them easier to transcend. I've shared some things from other lifetimes with you, and we've had sort of fun with it. We had fun with it because now in this time I can look back and now I feel light about it. I'm sure at the time I didn't feel all that light about it. It's because we recontextualize it. So sometimes if you're stuck in something, you can ask, is this a karmic propensity? Yeah. Was this a bad? Usually what you look for is the opposite. You look for the opposite. What's happening to you, you ask, was that what I did to others in my past life? And now I see what it's like. And the only way, so one of the ways the mind undoes its guilt is to undo it by living it through and living the side of the victim. So in the prior lifetime where you were the perpetrator, you now have the responsibility in this lifetime to undo that, either by good works or by experiencing it out and forgiving everything and everyone, including yourself. So the tool that helps you through all of this is, first of all, the comprehension does make many things easier to accept. That if you can go back with kinesiology and say, in some lifetime did I do such and such, or did such and such thing happen? And then you can get sort of an aha. Well, I guess it makes sense then. And early in life, I never heard of karma, but I would always say, I must have done something to somebody in some lifetime to deserve that. You know what I'm saying? It just sort of made sense that otherwise there would be no explanation for it, except that God is arbitrary and a sadist. There are many atheists in the world, and they're not all stupid. Many of them are quite brilliant. And when they look at the world through the Newtonian paradigm of reality, the idea that there's an infinite, benevolent God who is not different than love is idiotic. You understand? Logic, reason, at a certain point, will not take you to God, it'll take you to atheism. And at one level of consciousness, if you're not an atheist, I think you're stupid. I was a devout atheist for years, and I looked at anybody who believed in God as an absolute idiot. You look at the disaster of mankind and say, God is the source of all this, or you can keep him. So, that was when I held God as the source, the cause of the human karmic dilemma. What we see then as human tragedy is the effect of the ego, uncaused by God. So, it's as though the capacity for existence and life and consciousness is a given. And then what is done with it becomes one's own karmic responsibility, the consequences of which we see collectively as society. But when I became an atheist, it was because the totality of the suffering of all of mankind opened up as a revelation. It was staggering. I was a devout religionist at the time, and scrupulous, in fact, scrupulous. And I told you I used to dread Saturday afternoon. You went to confession that you wouldn't sin someplace before you went to church on Sunday morning and had communion. Anyway, I was out in the woods, and suddenly the totality of the suffering of all of mankind throughout all of time opened up in the most staggering revelation. On God, beyond the capacity of ordinary human thinkingness to comprehend. Staggering. In that instant, I became an atheist. God went out that fast. Can't believe in a God that allows that. Because when you look at the totality of human suffering, one has to be of a sizable dimension to even glance at it. It just blows you away. In clinical practice, you see it piecemeal. You see it piecemeal in the ER. In war, you see it piecemeal. But this came on, not piecemeal, but all of it. Whew, so was I ever a devout atheist? Man, I took Catholicism apart, Protestantism apart, the Reformation apart, the Bible idiotic, Thomas Aquinas. Good God, give me a break. I got straight A in theology and at Jesuit University. Straight A in ethics, straight A in logic, straight A in theology. Because if you're going to be against something, you better know a lot about it. So Friday afternoon outside of Marquette University in the nearest bar, we all our names on our mugs, was take on all. I sat in the corner and I took on all comers, all the religionists, and I would knock them out of the box one after another. Never lost a round. It's a fact. Never lost a round. All right, because within the Newtonian paradigm of reality, nothing about God is really provable. You have to go to the nonlinear, where you're beyond causality, you're beyond logic, you're beyond literalism and concrete, and you get to greater dimensions. So it takes the greater dimensions to heal the negativities that have arisen out of karma. Whatever one has inherited in one way or another, or come into, because you come into it just by being human. You share in human consciousness, the totality of human consciousness is something which dominates individual consciousness. The reason you can light up a whole crowd of enthusiasts about something is because that consciousness level is available to the whole crowd. If Hitler knew how to play that, he would play 10,000 people shouting Sieg Heil at the same time, and it was hypnotic, If you weren't a Nazi in those years in Germany, you must have been brain dead, because it was persuasive, it was all-encompassing, it was powerful, it was patriotic, it was military, it was grand. The fact that it was somewhat in error did not show up till later, but at the time it was, any normal kid would want to go to one of the boys' camps and learn how to become a member of the Hitler Youth. There'd have to be something wrong with you not to want to, because it was so prevailing in society. So we see how these dominant levels of consciousness then resonate in the human condition, because everybody in that crowd is a captive of the human condition. They're all born with the capacity for loyalty, nationalism, enthusiasm, macho masculinity, militarism, all those things. You inherit that as part of being a human. So, but the worst thing you see go on in the world, historically or currently, is really the consequence of being human. To be a human being, to begin with, a human being can't tell truth from falsehood. A walking, stumbling idiot. How did we ever get this far? I don't know. It boggles me that we even got here. Can you imagine a species that doesn't know truth from falsehood? If you don't know truth from falsehood, that pretty much puts you back in the animal kingdom, where your instinctual stimulus and response. Of course, this became more elaborate in the hominid, became more elaborate in Neanderthal man, Homo erectus. It became more elaborate, but still its innate nature didn't change at all. Greed, fear, attack, counterattack. Anything you see in Monkey Island is in every day's newspaper. No different at all. There's no difference between human society and Monkey Island. Little groups ganging up on each other, little gossipers like this, people getting some quick sex on the side while the female's not looking. People running in to grab things. Sally was telling me about, he was watching how life is. You know, the monkey grabs something, then a bigger monkey comes along and takes it away from him. Then a bigger monkey comes and knocks him out and takes it away from him. Then the big monkey comes along and hits him over the head and takes the whole deal. So that's today's political news, isn't it? So the position politically we're going to take now is stand up and grrr, take us on, you got big trouble. Whoa. The best defense is a good offense, huh? Well, it's been tried all different ways. We'll see how it works this time. I see how it worked in World War II. Pacifism and peace are not the same thing. All right, so we'll take a stand and look fierce and see if that holds off anybody with any common sense. But megalomaniacs don't have common sense. If you say walk across the line, we'll shoot you, they'll still walk across the line because there's some nuts and bolts missing. Nobody would do anything so stupid is what we rely on. We've been wrong over and over again. Nobody would be so stupid as to so-and-so. Oh yeah, they would. They would. So we have the karmic unity of the universe. Then creation expressing itself through consciousness and the energy of life, evolving up through the animal kingdom. We see consciousness becoming more and more conscious, more and more subtle, more advanced, progression of consciousness up to the point of Homo sapien. Homo sapien. Then we see Homo sapien calibrated at 90 at the time of Buddha, 100 at the time of Jesus, 190 throughout the centuries. 190 throughout the centuries. 1700s, let's just do it because I don't know if we ever did it here. The consciousness level of mankind in the 1700s, we have permission to ask that here, was over 185. 185. In the 1900s, in the early 1900s, it was at it was over 185, 188. At the turn of in 1900, consciousness level of mankind was at over 188, 189, 189. Okay. In the 1950s, the consciousness level of mankind was over 190, 191. It was still at 190. In 1980, the consciousness level of mankind was over 190, 192, 190. In 1986, the consciousness level of mankind was over 190 resist, 191, 193, 195. 1986. 1988, the consciousness level of mankind was over 200 resist, 205, 206. Wow, right there in the late 80s, suddenly all of the potentiality for human life totally changed, of a greater significance than the temperature of the Earth going up 2 degrees. To go from 190 in my own lifetime then, consciousness level went up. Let's see, when I was born, the consciousness level of mankind was over 180, 182, 184, 184. When I was born, it was 184. Now it's 207. 207. That's a very, very major change. Very major change. It means that karmically, you might say, the entire human race has evolved. You see, we're carried along by the wave of the advance of consciousness of all of mankind, the karmic potentiality of humanness itself, as well as one's own individual karma. One also shares sort of an ethnic karma, national karma. If you live in a certain country, you sort of share the fate of that whole country, don't you? When it goes down, you go down with it. So we have an infinite number of components to what one would call one's own individual karma. It's not individual, but we call it individual. Unique in that certain patterns peculiar to your own prior lifetimes are influencing it. Well, let's just reaffirm that with kinesiology. What I just said is a fact, resist. Okay. Most people have lived, most people in this room have lived many previous physical lifetimes, resist. The average would be more than 8, 12, 20, 25. The average of lifetimes of everybody in this room is about 24, 25, 26. So that's just of academic interest. So if all of us have lived an average of 24 lifetimes, some people are greedy and live 50 or 60, and others have only had 4 or 5. Some people are smart and only had 1 previous lifetime, and this is going to be the last. However, what we're trying to do is recontextualize it so that you don't take it so personally, so you don't feel bad about it. Because I don't like to encourage people into spiritual introspection unless the capacities to be hard on yourself is alleviated. In psychoanalysis, the first rule, and I did psychoanalysis and I was psychoanalyzed. The first rule in psychoanalysis was to approach the patient from the side of the superego. First, relieve their excessive punitive conscience before you start digging up material from the unconscious. First, get the conscience to be a little bit more reasonable before you start looking at ulterior motives and things that are repressed. The reason they're repressed is because they're so hateful, because they make you feel so guilty, because they're so awful that you wouldn't tell anybody on the planet. And now you're supposed to lay on the couch and reveal them to your analyst. So, the analyst aligns himself with the person's healthy side and tries to ameliorate the sadistic nature of the superego. The conscience tends to be sadistic. You see that expressed in society. We don't want to just capture the bad people, we want to kill them, exterminate them, electrocute them, and torture them a little bit before they go. Yes, and that's what the superego and that's what your superego has in store for you folks. That which you would condemn others to, is exactly what your unconscious condemns you to. You cannot judge savagely out there and think that when it comes up within yourself, because the superego will not differentiate between you and others. Stealing a cookie requires death. That's the kind of superego I used to have. I mean, I know it. God, I told you about the Jansen swimsuit billboard. Good God. Only death would. So we want to ameliorate our view of the world and our relationship with the world, because the world is a projection of the ego. The savagery that you hold against the world is nothing but a mirror that you hold against yourself. Now, you must have very severe things that you're holding against yourself. Otherwise, everyone would become enlightened. Realize that the self, the source of that which is listening right now, is God. Everybody just became enlightened. Some of you didn't accept it? What? No? Why not? Maybe we should try it the other way. Anyone who doesn't completely and totally surrender to God right now, we shall electrocute. There, so I'll let go on another. Okay. So spiritual work is becoming acquainted with the subtleties. You become aware of it subtly. And now the question is how to approach it, how to undo that propensity without going into excessive guilt about it. You can't go into squirming, hair shirt, self-torture over every indelicate comment you might have made offhand. I tend to, but after a while, you'll see that it's an indulgence. Excessive guilt is just another indulgence. It's another addiction. It's another spiritual error. So one has to surrender one's sense of guilt and self-punitive quality to God. The willingness to surrender, self-punitive, self-hatred, guilt and shame. The next block that comes up when you try to do that is that there's a belief system, especially arising out of Christianity, that the only propitiation for sin is suffering. And you'll find that the real Christian is really addicted to suffering. They are. And the way to God is through suffering, penance, crawling through the streets of the city over the cobblestones with the blood running out of your knees. Not eating, not taking a bath, crawling from here to some holy place. Penance, suffering, pain, then are addictions. They're excesses. They're indulgences that one has to be willing to surrender to God. That which is the infinite source of all of creation is not impressed by bleeding knees, self-flagellation, burning off your fingers and toes, chopping off your thumb. Other insanities. Spiritual insanity. So, the totality of all of creation then shines forth as one's existence at this moment, and as a result of karmic propensities, one is at this particular point in some kind of a purgatorial realm, where the opportunity to transcend all that is present at all times. In a true purgatory, then, you get to undo the negatives of the past and choose the positive. You get a chance to undo. We've got ministers here who are authorities on purgatory. I'm not an authority on purgatory. It just has always seemed to me that in a domain where you can go from the most horrid to the most exquisite, that is really the nature of purgatory. Limbo is where you just hang out and wait to go one place or another. I'm trying to remember Catholic theology. Limbo is where you sort of hang out. You don't go one place or another. You're sort of marking time or something. Purgatory, you get a chance to undo your errors and earn your way into higher dimensions. The heavens are then the consequence of having undone the required amount of negative karma that one's consciousness level is now consistent with more heavenly domains. We get from research that consciousness that we need a savior below levels of 600. Let's see. Entities who leave the body less than 600 require the intervention of a savior to enter heaven. Yeah. All right, so a savior, a guru, a higher teaching is necessary. The ancient wisdom is that without the assistance of higher truth from whatever its source, the likelihood is that unaided, the individual lacks sufficient spiritual power to overcome the ego. That makes the ego sound quite formidable, doesn't it? God, I'm scared of the ego. I'm sorry I said that. That's a fact. All right. So just spiritual truth, such as knowledge in itself, has the intrinsic action of a guru. The truth itself. Okay. To merely hear the truth already has the effect of the blessing of the guru. Okay. Okay. All right. So to merely hear, to merely know certain things is already elevating, already advances one's consciousness, has a catalytic effect. Sometimes just one little piece of information like solves all kinds of little things in the puzzle. They all make sense. Sometimes karmic research does that. You karmically search back and you find some single event or collection of events or propensities in certain lifetimes. And now you see that over and over again you're asked to go to transcend that, to transcend that, to transcend that, to value money over life. Okay? In the lifetime I'm thinking of, I valued money over life, which is greed over life. Yeah. To let people die out of greed, to value gain, greed, money, treasure over the value of human life, to sacrifice human life for money. So that's a pretty common one, right? Anybody who's lived before is likely to have done that, right? Why? Because human consciousness has evolved up from the animal kingdom. And unless you're a greedy animal, you really don't survive. How long does an altruistic animal survive? Here, Hubert, you can have my bone. And if there's any left, I'll have what's left. Sorry. Well, you get smaller and smaller, and finally you fall over. So our first commitment is to be a good animal. A good animal, you have to have a certain gusto for life and a certain love of life, an enthusiasm for life. You got to have the capacity to get in there and whop it. There's times when you got to do that. That's the most spiritual thing you can do. Feeble monks aren't worth a nickel. I'm praying. Get off your knees, old man. Sweep the floor. Don't you see all the crap around here? So, One of my ambitions was, one of my secret ambitions, I'll have to let go, was to be a verger in a great cathedral. Can you imagine, You're the janitor, you don't have to talk to anybody, say anything to anybody. People are idiotic, you don't have to listen to their prattle. You get to hear the choir practicing Thursday nights, Wednesday nights. You get to live around incense, stained glass windows, incredible sculpture, incredible beauty. It's the way to God. I think God is jealous of keeps the job of janitor in the great cathedral for his favored ones. If I'm going to have another lifetime, I'd like to be a verger in a great, no, kind of a lot one. Because by then I'll have all kinds of regulations. Fingerprint register, and you'll have verger regs coming out from the welfare department. So the day of the verger in the great cathedral is over. Let me just see. I see what that is. That's an attachment to a previous lifetime. Thank you. All right, so that hankering, which came up this morning, the minute I hear that music, it throws me into the ecstasy of beauty, which is a very rapid pathway to God. Because to just immerse oneself in beauty, the oneness of beauty and God and the self, suddenly the barriers dissolve. One is all of that. So, just as aversions come from past lifetimes, the minute I heard that music, I longed, I could feel the longing for that lifetime to be a verger. I didn't realize a previous lifetime, I thought it was a fantasy lifetime. To be the verger in a great cathedral. And of course, when I go to Europe, I go from cathedral to cathedral. Some people go from Berlin to Paris to London. I just go from St. Pat's to, one cathedral to another. So that attachment to cathedrals, to be of silent service to God in the presence of that beauty as a form of worship, is an attachment. So the karma then plays a part in our ambitions, our daydreams, the limitation of what we think we can be or accomplish in this lifetime. Obviously, people in a group like this have heard, have responded to that which within them is telling them that the pathway to spiritual evolution is theirs. So people in a room like this have already evolved to an incredibly advanced degree. We said that only 4% of the world's population ever gets over the 400s. 4%, let's see. Gets over, only 4% are able to transcend logic and reason. So although this is the crown jewel, logic and reason is the alleged crown jewel of man, the difference between man and animals is that men can think. Yeah, right. This is supposedly the crown jewel of man. From the viewpoint of education, from the viewpoint of the social evolution, the capacity to think and reason, to be able to develop science and all the great benefits of science. So the 400s are enormously beneficial. Without the 400s, half of us wouldn't be in this room. We would have died of things that we now cure with penicillin and streptomycin and surgery and many other things. So reason is the great salvation from the animal world. So down here, we're stuck in the animal world. Then we transcend into humanness. And with the exception of kitties and dogs, who somehow passed us by, I don't know how they got up there. we hit willingness. The willingness is different than ambition. Ambition will get you through medical school. You gotta be a workhorse. But to be a good doctor takes something else. It takes willingness. Then it takes something different. Willingness, acceptance, and an easygoingness, and then finally an unconditional compassion for human suffering. But those are beyond reason. But in a group like this, we know that because of one's karmic propensity, then, one is evolved up into the 400s. In the 400s we read, we go to lectures, we visit cathedrals, we begin to appreciate that there is already within us the higher levels of consciousness, and it's merely a matter of identifying with them. So everyone here already has the highest level of consciousness within them. And the difficulty then is not the failure to acknowledge it, because many people in this room are quite devout, but the habit of identifying with the mind, with the ego, with logic, as who you are. So the problem then is really one of identification. To identify with the content rather than the context. To identify with the content of form, logic, reason, feeling, etc., and to fail to realize that one is context. Karen, are you there? Let's have that music at 7:50 again, and then we'll take a break. I'm going to get out of those seats until I tell you. You wouldn't give me permission. Anybody ever see Mail Call Sunday nights, the History Channel? It's hysterical. You're a vet of World War II. But the lead actor in that, he comes on like a caricature of the top sergeant, you know, and he says, "Don't touch that channel. Nobody gave you permission. I'll tell you when it's time to leave this program." It just breaks me up because it represents that anything, if recontextualized, totally changes its flavor and significance. You see? In other words, in that context, his attitude is hysterically funny because you're not victim. In another circumstance, he would be terrifying. When I was 17 years old, the top bosun's mate, you know, would terrify me. He'd say, "Those pillows are not a straight line." Holy Christ, your heart was hard. So the context was different. What happened to that beautiful music? I wanted to hear that again. That brings you right back to the truth of that which you truly are. And we forget. Beauty brings you back to the memory of the reality. So that which is God and that which is beauty are one and the same. I don't like to talk about the pathway of the heart because it doesn't last long. Adoration, devotion, worship. Someone asked, how do you get beyond the thinkingness of the mind and beauty is one of the most immediate ways. The beauty of the music takes you out of thinkingness in one instant. It's like incredible beauty immobilizes the mind. So, beauty then is the awareness of the grace of God, which is different than discussing the various things we discuss. It's the way around the mind. Somebody asked, how do you stop that thinkingness? You become enamored of God instead of enamored of the thoughts. To discern the presence of God in all that exists is a gift that suddenly comes forth of its own when the willingness to surrender all that stands in its way. The gratification, the satisfaction, the excitement of thinking this, feeling this, emotions. It's a great leap because we transcend the instincts of the animal, we transcend the thinkingness of Homo sapien, and respond to the divinity within us. We said this morning, and verified it, out of the unmanifest arises the manifest. Out of the manifest arises existence as beingness. And with that existence arises consciousness and the energy of life. Therefore, all that has life arises from the unmanifest to the manifest through existence and beingness, through consciousness and awareness. All that is created by God has within it divinity. Let's see if that's so. All that exists has within it its source as divinity resists. Consequently, then, the awareness of the presence of God as the source of one's own existence is innate within consciousness itself. It is already present. And it's only a matter of letting go of the identifications with all that stand in its way. The purposes of the lectures prior to last month were to by familiarity and by description and by analysis, understand the structure of the ego, and by understanding it, have the capacity to disassemble it. And we always start the lectures by reminding ourselves that all that is what it is by virtue of the divinity of its creation. Each thing is only becoming, manifesting its, you might say, karmic propensity to be that which it is. Therefore, there's no reason to worry about God, or reaching God, or being with God, or anything, because one is constantly in the presence of God, who is the source of consciousness, out of which arises your worrying about God. There's no need to worry about God. There's only the capacity to appreciate beauty, the exquisite power of perfection. So beauty is a style of recognizing the perfection of all that exists. As spiritual awareness progresses, the awareness of the perfection and intrinsic beauty of all that exists becomes overwhelming. And at a certain point, it becomes incapacitating. And if the music is beautiful enough, you can't stand up and talk, you have to sit down now. Whether the body eats or doesn't eat, you can see how quickly all that becomes irrelevant. You go into a state of spiritual ecstasy. The survival of the physicality depends on your neighbors. If you have friendly neighbors that drop in, the body survives. If not, it doesn't. And it's totally immaterial. Somebody says it's time to eat now, and so you eat. Otherwise, you completely forget all about it. So as we get into the higher levels of the 500s, you get into a benevolence towards life, a benevolence towards yourself, a benevolence to all that exists. There's a benevolence towards even the most horrific, because it cannot help itself but be what it is. It doesn't have the karmic whatever it takes to not be other than that which it is. And then in a greater level, one says, there's no reason for it to be other than what it is. It can just be what it is. Not particularly saintly, but so it is what it is. And there's letting go, wanting to change anything as it is, because you see the only thing you want to change is your perception of it all and your judgmentalism about it. You want bin Laden to be different than what he is. No, I don't want bin Laden to be different than what he is. Then who would be bin Laden? Somebody's got to be the bad example of the day, you know what I mean? Hitler, Mussolini, all gone. Here, all the bad guys of when I was young. New guys arise on the stage. And in the highest dimension, one sees that that is all like a hologram. And there's no point to change the hologram because it's evolving out of its own intrinsic, innate, perfect balance and order within itself. All is merely becoming that which it is in its expression within physicality. You know? There's no need to change anything. we become our potential, not because it's going to do something for the world, not because it's going to do something for us. Those are kindly thoughts. Kindly thoughts. But in actuality, the overall consciousness field of mankind is elevating, is developing because of who we are. The only thing you need to do, the better the life of all mankind, is to appreciate the beauty of that incredible music. You've done all you can do. To acknowledge the presence of God, to feel the exquisite joy of that beauty. It sends out a vibration of such immense power. You see, because power cannot be resisted, whereas force can. The power of your adoration of God, your love, your devotion, radiates out and elevates the whole field of consciousness. And it affects millions of people who are not even aware they're being afflicted. Just as the person is about to do this, something, he says, he lets it go. He doesn't know why he let it go. It's because the field is so high now, it makes that kind of an action almost impossible. So what we do then is, by the realization of our own innate perfection, impact the consciousness of all of mankind. We recalibrated the level of consciousness as it has moved forward over the centuries. In the late 1980s, that was the time of the harmonic conversions. That was the time when all the spiritual committed people in the world joined together at a certain hour of the morning. We all woke up at 4 o'clock or something and prayed for peace. That was the time when monolithic, atheistic communism collapsed. All of those things. And I suppose there was some kind of a confluence astrologically. Not because the astrologic formation causes things, but because that which brings peace brings simultaneously many things all at the same time that are in concordance with each other. So we're part of that emergence. We're the leading edge of Homo spiritus, the evolution of a new being, Homo spiritus. When the evolution of consciousness crossed over 200, it signaled the emergence of a new level of life, a new potentiality of life. Because it's a more powerful level of consciousness, then it is of assistance to spiritual progression. So my guess is that spiritual awareness will progress more rapidly and reach more people than it has in the past, profoundly affect more aspects of society. We see that within the last few months. We see that back when the consciousness level was below 190, when I grew up, winning, gain, wealth, prestige, fame, having a Cadillac, titles, degrees, all the gains, the worldly gains, the corner office with 2 windows, having 3 secretaries, the right address. That which was sought was gain. Its downside was victory over one's enemy. Kill the Japs, kill the Nazis, kill somebody. Oh, it's to kill somebody. Kill your enemies. So the criteria of success were you went to war, you killed your enemies, then you came home, got a degree, straight A, got doctorates, made millions of dollars, lived in the best place. That was the signal of success. To be a millionaire. It was a TV program. I want to be a millionaire. I mean, it sounds stupid, you know, it sounds so juvenile, but at the time it was very exciting. I remember when the $64 question was exciting. $64 would get you from here to New York and back, you know, now it wouldn't get you to Cottonwood. Wouldn't get you in and out of Walmart, that's for sure. I always say, by God, this time I'm going to Walmart and I'm just going to buy those screens. That's all I'm buying, those grills. $163 it cost me to buy them. $16 grills. Well, now we see all that's changed. Now winning over our enemies is even questioned. We're going through soul searching. We've got some really heavy-duty enemies out there, and the whole country is examining their conscience. Is it okay to go after your enemies or not? Defend yourself against them, or stand up to them, or put them out of business before they do you in. So the new yardstick of success, the new yardstick in society is integrity. Integrity is where it's at right now. Because of lack of integrity, we see the multimillionaire corporations collapse. Enron and Altel and Millwork and Palm Gump and all those classy names they gave them. All the ricky-ticky names. Anyway, they sought the old paradigm. Success at any cost. Man, what's wrong with that? Back at the time of the robber barons, I mean, what was wrong with that? There wasn't anything immoral about working the workers to death and firing them before Christmas. The old big corporations always fired them the week before Christmas. And I'd say, good God, have they no sense at all? Don't they have any public relations person? They have just injured their corporation far more. They spend millions on advertising, and then they always do all the big layoffs the week before Christmas. In the public esteem, they went from here down to here. You know what I mean? Couldn't they wait till the week after Christmas? Always the week before Christmas. I don't know if you grew up in the 50s and 40s and 60s. They always lay them off the week before Christmas. Now, the new level to which we're answerable now is integrity. Because of lack of integrity, the famous lady with her own magazine and all, multimillionaire, had to resign from the board of directors of the stock market. Not because she was convicted of anything, but because her integrity was now in question. That was never heard of years ago. All of you who are older, did you ever hear of anybody getting knocked off the board of directors of some corporation for lack of integrity? Never heard of it. He got his job by having lack of integrity. If you didn't have lack of integrity, you're never going to be a salesman in that company, I'll tell you. Tell them anything. Just get them to sign the dotted line and make sure the check gets certified. That's the rule. When I was a salesman, you were supposed to accompany the customer to the bank. Roofing and siding. Right? Roofing and siding. I saw roofing and siding, house to house. Lord, forgive me. Amen. Oh, yes, lady. All right, so we have a new paradigm of reality now, a very powerful paradigm. Even the networks, whose own integrity is questionable at times, are touting integrity as the new paradigm of reality. Not success. Nobody gives a rap about your success. Being a millionaire doesn't mean anything. All kinds of poor folks became millionaires during the high-tech stock market expansion. I had patients that could hardly afford a tank of gas, to be truthful with you, but they were millionaires. Every day they check their stocks on their computer, you know. God, they were worth $10 million, you know. By noon, they're worth the $12 million. By 3 in the afternoon, they're worth $14 million. Except they lacked integrity, see? So now, I want to be a millionaire. It sounds sort of stupid. Everybody got a chance, a shot to be a millionaire. If you didn't, your aunt did or your neighbor did. I mean, being a millionaire doesn't mean anything. Success doesn't mean anything. What holds up long-term is integrity, and everybody knows that. The businesses we calibrated before we published Power versus Force as Integris is now the biggest corporation in the world, the entire world. If that doesn't prove that integrity pays, then what does? So business now, some members of this group here are working to carry that message into business, that your bottom line nowadays doesn't depend on how many you sell. That'll give you a little pop on your stock, but it's not going to carry you through. I wouldn't put that in your 401k, folks. What you better put in your 401k is integrity, so that 30 years from now, when you need that 401k, it hasn't gone down the drain. And the only thing I know that'll keep it going down the drain is integrity. Why? Because integrity itself, just like the broken window, drags that which is negative to it. That which is positive pulls that which is positive to it. I'd like to be a greeter in Walmarts. I really like that as a job. I mean, I just love it. Imagine you just hug people all day and love them. What can I do for you? Where's the underwear? Where's the hats? I mean, what a fun job, you know? That one's as fun as being a cab driver. I like being a cab driver. Oh, that was fun. You're a cab driver, you chatter, and you're friends with all the people. By the time they leave the cab, you're best buddies. You know what I mean? He wants your phone number. He wants you to come to his sister's birthday party next week. The chance to just love lots of people unconditionally is just, you know, a really great opportunity. It's probably why I gave up being a verger in a cathedral. The life of the solitary monk has its virtue. Everybody needs a life as a solitary monk, and it's a great life. Because through that absolute aloneness, the simplicity, to just have a candle and a stick and a book and a chair, you really don't need anything more. You really do not need anything more. And when I came out to Sedona, that's the way we lived for quite a while. With a box, with a candle, with an apple, and a cot from the dime store. It was fantastic. Then life got worse. I started to own things. Got worse and worse. Oh, man. You become a captive of your own possessions. You become their slave, their servant. All right. So we find God through simplicity, through renunciation. The renunciation can be physical, social. The renunciation is internal, to renounce, to be willing to surrender out of devotion to God, the satisfaction and the gratification one gets out of one's mental gyrations. To juice revenge, to juice resentment, to juice self-pity. At the same time, not make them wrong. You see, we let go of these positions, we let go our attachment to them, but not out of guilt and making them wrong. I like to complain and grumble. I say to her, honey, if we didn't have each other to complain and grumble to, who the heck would we talk to? Now, one of our forms of love is we both listen to each other's grumbles. The air conditioning on my car doesn't work now. And I can't drive it to Phoenix now because it doesn't work. She says, oh, that's awful. You can take my car. So. A close neighbor who works with us, Lou, has computer trouble with his car. I hope he complains to somebody. He hasn't complained to me, but if I were him, I'd complain about it. I paid good money for the car, and the computer doesn't work. You got to have somebody to grumble to and be human with. So, you see, you take your own self with a dash of salt, you know what I mean? You can't take yourself too seriously. You can indulge yourself, but not take it too seriously. You can have a tantrum, you can throw yourself on the floor. It's good. It's good, it's fun. You just throw yourself on the floor and just scream with anger and hit the floor. Within everybody is a 6-month-old. So you don't make it wrong. You see what I mean? Within all of us is the vindictive judge. You're going to be put away and suffer for this young man and never see the light of day. You see? Yes, sir. So to transcend something, you have to be able to accept it. To accept it, you have to get off right and wrong about it. It just is that way. There's ugly little creatures in the sea. Their mothers love them, but nobody else does. It's all right for them to be there because consciousness evolves and it expresses itself in form throughout its evolution. So if we look around the manifest world, we see all these levels of consciousness, some lower than what we even have on the chart. Poisonous little things that live at the bottom of the sea. So it's like all these levels of consciousness express themselves in form. And each one then is like a stepping stone. So we look within ourselves and we see all that's possible within the field of consciousness. All the positives and all the things we call negatives and all. And we get off a positionality about our own positionalities. It's natural to have positionalities, right and wrong, good and evil, love and hate. They're not opposites, they're positionalities. They're all positionalities along the same line. They're not opposites. So we have to always confirm that. Because to undo the ego, you have to let go of positionalities. And positionalities are set up by the dualistic thinkingness of the mind. The mind tends to think in dualistic, for those that haven't seen it here. Here, in one instant you'll get what it takes 50 years of meditation to get. This will save you all kinds of monk times. And the lousy food that goes with being a monk. Turnips, crap. I mean, you hang out in the wrong monkery where humility takes a dietary form. Porridge and turnips, that's all you get there. Hardly any clothes to wear. Forget turning on the heat in the wintertime. Austerity and renunciation. And then you become a rack of bones. As we said, there's no such thing as polarities. What we see here is the presence of heat. And as the presence of heat diminishes, now we call it something different. We call it cold, and we call this zero. But you can see that's arbitrary. There's only one variable, the presence of heat or its absence, that's all. There's the presence of love or its absence. Absence. So we become friendly, the first form that forgiveness, becoming benign, benevolent, forgiving, generous, compassionate, accepting, affectionate, is towards yourself. We practice it by looking out into the world and seeing what is it out there that we're still judgmental about, can't accept, can't forgive, etc. Because that's within yourself, projected out into the world. So the world serves then, it serves us spiritually, that the structure of society and its operations are the ego projected out there for us to understand. So that way the world serves us. It's a constant source of teaching, of learning, of opportunity. The capacity to witness, because it's out there, it's easier to accept. We can see the cruelty out there because it's out there and it's them. Because of guilt, we don't see it within ourselves. We become more sensitive to it. And then what we do is, because we're spiritually committed, is we let it go within ourselves. And in so doing, we serve the world. Everything that we let go within ourselves, we let go also within the world, within the level of the field of consciousness itself is affecting everyone. So, let's see if that's so. Everything I serve within myself, therefore serves the world. Resist. Everything you do within yourself, you're thereby serving the world. Why? Because you're part of the world. So you can't forgive it in yourself and not have the world benefit, because you are the world. You are one with the world. Therefore, all the spiritual work we do within ourselves, we can consciously dedicate it to God, consciously dedicate it to our fellow human beings. It's better than parades. Parades don't really change anything.